dictatorship that we have installed, in which case we just won't really think about it. These are boomers, so I suspect they're using the symbol to mean Russia, not communism. You see a lot of hammer and sickle Trump stuff among lib boomers. They just see it as Russia. No, I know. Iran proves you wrong? What do you mean, bro? You're so delusional. Iran proves you wrong? What? Do you think the Islamic Republic is a communist movement? Iran is the most anti-capitalist regime? Oh, yeah. No, you're right, man. Yeah, they were. You know what it was actually when when the Ayatollah was ripping every like revolutionary, socialist, communist in the country, throwing them en masse in jail, in prison. As a matter of fact, using them as like the number one ops, far more consistently, far more like a far larger threat to the established order in Iran. He was actually doing that as leftist infighting. When Iran was purging the left mobilization that played a formative role in the Iranian revolution, okay, what they were actually doing was leftist infighting, where they were like, we're trying to do Islamo-communism. We're trying to do Islamo-communism the right way, and all these other Soviet-aligned movements in the country are actually doing it the wrong way, and that's why they were throwing them in fucking prison and purging them. Guy who doesn't understand anything. And unfortunately, this is like the overwhelming majority of people. Whenever we talk about fucking Iran, bro, he doesn't realize you're making fun of him. Yes, because he thinks being anti-imperialist or being anti-West as a understandable position for sovereignty in a country that is designed as an adversary towards the West is automatically that you're a leftist. Like you are a leftist across the board. You're ideologically a leftist. No, man, that's just for survival, okay? And as I've reiterated over and over again, especially in terms of Iran or even with Hamas, from my perspective, when a country is being utterly dominated by Western forces, okay, and is in the death throes, actively trying to keep everything together in a very diverse country that is a powder keg, okay, it does not matter what their ideological predisposition is. Like that's the reason why leftists used to say critical support to insert whatever country you're talking about. Trying to learn the correct positions on the USSR and China makes me feel like a conspiracy theorist. Okay, that's fine. How do you rationalize nuclear proliferation and the idea that inevitably as an irrational actor will have nukes? Can you use global destruction? I agree that all nation states should be able to acquire nukes. You want to know something? I mean, I've talked about this quite a bit. As far as like countries that want to develop sovereignty, especially if they're not under the nuclear umbrella, the nuclear security umbrella of the United States of America, have to develop nuclear arms, right? Like have to develop nuclear arms and have to have a robust military to be able to defend themselves and said nuclear arms as well. Now, that is a consistent take that I've had. I also will say that, like, obviously, I mean, I guess we're going to get into Iran in a little bit. Hold on. Let me see how many more videos there are, because I want to watch the Kristi Noem thing first, and then get into the Iran situation. And everybody wants to hear my analysis on this, and it's understandable, but you guys want a spoiler alert. Iranian Azadi, who just ran from Iran and Istanbul now, people don't know how to calculate the situation. They're either pro-IR or pro-bombing. Yeah. as I've said before, even in the past, far before this last iteration of the protest that took place in Iran, one of the major issues with the Iranian government is the endless amount of investment that they have for education while simultaneously being crippled by sanctions. The economy is in a fucking state of disarray, as always. And they still hold on to fundamentalism as the connective tissue that reasserts their power, okay? Fundamentalism is seen in that part of the world as being the truest form, the truest expression of being anti-Western intervention. This is something that I've tried to explain to Americans quite a bit, and they have a really hard time understanding that. However, that fundamentalism, especially when you have an unimaginably educated population, is always going to lead to people going, what the fuck do you mean I have to abide by the morality police standards? This creates a massive clash with the way that the government has tried to maintain sovereignty over their own country, the way that this government has tried to reassert sovereignty over their own country, and maintain like the strategic posture they have that, let's be real, 1/4 of the entire country actually abides by. And a lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people think like, no, every single person in Iran is actually anti, the Ayatollahs or whatever. Okay, this is not the case. There are still a fuck ton of people who are Islamists through and through, who actually love this administration's ridiculous posture and ridiculous repressive elements. Okay. Why is there a clash? That just sounds condescending. What do you mean? Why is there a clash? Of course there's going to be a clash, dude. What are you talking about? Like, think about the United States of America and how much we get fucking mad when the American government tries to be like, we're going to take away bodily autonomy from women in red states. Now imagine, try to imagine what that looks like if you are, a young Iranian, well-educated young Iranian, access to the fucking Western world, and you see Western liberalization in terms of like social repression and whatnot as a understandable movement in the right direction in your country, and the Republic refuses to, in this unimaginably diverse country especially, the Republic refuses to do anything but every now and then bring some reformist presidents that don't actually move the needle in the appropriate direction in terms of reforms, in terms of scaling back the social conservatism or the repressive elements. It's just not. It's not going to work. It's a fucking powder keg for that reason. I think you're talking about the concept of a relative deprivation that is a highly educated populace whose economic and social reality does not meet the standards they have been raised to expect via education and social mobility. It's the same thing that happened in Egypt during the Arab Spring. Yes, sanctions paired up with discontent over repression from the administration, from the government, will always create a tremendous instability, especially in a country that otherwise would fall to a lot of fucking sectarian violence and balkanization if left to the interest of Western states that want to cripple the only country in the region that has the military power to actually hold Israel at bay. That's it. And let's be real. Every single time these sorts of protests have happened, people go, oh, it's just like Mossad. It's America. This is true. America and Mossad are heavily involved in these protests. America specifically is heavily involved in creating the economic conditions that lead to these sorts of protests, okay? And then the government comes in and fucking kills a bunch of people. And the protesters themselves are also very violent and getting increasingly more violent, okay? Every single time these kinds of protests happen. The problem here, however, is that in the aftermath of these sorts of skirmishes, let's say, if you want to call it that, okay, you have to let up. You have to give in to the demands being made. You have to, because if you don't, then the protests are only going to grow. And it's getting to a point, especially in this last iteration, where while there is, of course, always going to be Western involvement, there are plenty of young people in Iran who have developed, understandably, a reactionary attitude towards Islam in general and are very clearly, not at the direction of Israel or America, very clearly expressing their fucking anger. Okay? You are very wrong. It's not 2019 anymore. It's way less than 25%. Do you even know what the initial protests were about? Yes, it was fucking small business owners and you know, market. It's like people not having access to basic necessities and groceries and things like that, and also specifically the bazaar owners and, like, you know, market owners that were protesting against, like, the economic situation in Iran. But the very fact that that was the tinder that exploded into this massive fucking situation where, you know, a lot of people died, a lot of people were killed by the government, is another indication that this is becoming less and less sustainable. Yeah, shops are closing because there's limited cash flow, so they can't even pay rent to keep shops open. So yeah, America did create the conditions for that. The United States of America absolutely created the conditions for that. Westerners don't fucking get it. Iranian government has been a lot more substantial support than they think. Khamenei is literally the highest religious figure for Shias. Middle Eastern countries don't work the way you are describing. You are so westernized, dude. When I was in Egypt during the revolution, this exact bullshit happened, and people in Egypt to this day regret even protesting. What? Middle Eastern countries don't. What are you? I don't understand what your criticism of my commentary is here. I'm Iranian. I have to tell you right now, we have only two options: either Pahlavi to guide the way for a democracy, and yes, it's going to be Western backed, or stick with the brutal regime heavily backed by China and Russia. I will gladly choose Pahlavi. Yes. Young Iranians do not know why the Iranian revolution took place to begin with, because they only know one repressive element, which is the Ayatollah. So they don't understand why there was already fucking mass mobilization that took place, because it was a real revolution. The Iranian revolution wasn't just like Islamist forces coming into power, okay? There was a reason for why that took place. That was literally Western intervention in the Shah and how fucking ruthless and how brutal the Shah was. Like, that was a real revolution. It was a real social revolution that took place in Iran. And I think a lot of people don't know that, especially younger people. So the only brutal, ruthless, repressive forces that they've experienced has been this modern iteration of the Ayatollahs. And therefore, they have no concept of understanding what it would look like if they returned back to a Western-backed puppet state installed on top of the Iranian population, especially in a country that is so diverse as Iran. Does it seem like anything is coming out of all these protests? I mean, I think they've very clearly, ruthlessly suppressed the protests, and the Iranian government's assessment here is going to be, it was all Mossad, it was all Westerners, and the protesters themselves were the reason for why there was so much violence. They killed, you know, firefighters, they killed cops, all this stuff, and there's truth to that as well. But like, ultimately, it was the state that is the most ruthless force here, the ruthless force of suppression. And yes, remember, guys, I know that there's always going to be Western intervention. I know that there's always going to be Western intervention. You guys are being ridiculous if you think that that's not the case. Okay? There's two different ways of analyzing this. In terms of sovereignty, it doesn't matter if someone is a fucking chud or an Islamist or whatever, okay? In terms of like fighting against any sort of Western intervention, that calculation is not even, you know, remotely relevant. There's also another part of this that I find to be interesting, especially with Iran, okay? Especially with Iran. And that is how much people like Mike Pompeo, Jerusalem Post, and many others have talked about their open involvement in the protests this time around, greatly overemphasizing how they're actually pushing the needle. Not realizing, I think, that this is actually perfect propaganda for the Ayatollah to just turn around and say, see, these are outside forces. But I think the reason why they are presenting it as such, the reason why they are presenting it as such and not even fearful of the repercussions here in terms of like the positions hardening internally against outside influence and outside enforcement is because they realize that the situation on the ground is so fucked up that it doesn't matter. They could literally be like, Mossad is doing this and there's nothing you can say about it, and the population will still rise up. Does that mean that, do I know where this will go? I do not. Okay. There are numerous different outside forces that want to take ownership over the protests, whether it be Mossad, CIA, or whether it be MEK, which obviously is also an internal force inside of Iran as well, or whether it be the Shah, right? The Shah riders. And the reason why there isn't really much coverage on what the internal left forces in Iran look like is because the administration, the regime, has always considered left forces to be the number one op. Okay? That's it. Their number one op has always fucking been, the number one op for the Ayatollah has always been the left. Yes, MEK is massively unpopular in Iran. The Shah is even more popular, I think, from what I understand. But it doesn't even matter. Now you got like Rudy Giuliani shitting on the Shah. The MEK only has power amongst the diaspora, especially the U.S. diaspora. They've successfully become the main forum for Iranian Americans, but they have no real support base in Iran itself. And I don't even think the Shah itself has as robust and as popular a support internally inside of Iran either. It's just that people have run out of options and they think that it's the only thing that they can hold on to. Is the left even left in Iran? Do you think Iran will go through the same thing as Syria went through? No. Hopefully not. It's crazy though that the goal, I think, broadly the goal from the West is to balkanize Iran, which would be devastating. Fucking bomb. And I don't even think, if you were to poll every single fucking Iranian person that's in the streets right now, if you were to ask them sincerely, do you want to balkanize Iran? They would say no. Iranis are very proud people. Okay, they're very proud people. They've literally have revolted against Western intervention over and over again. So, like, I don't think that they would be on board with like the complete destruction of this, 1,000-year empire with like 1,000 years of history in general. I don't think they would be on board with that at all. So it's a complicated situation for that reason. But the discontent is very real. It's not just Western-backed intervention. Western-backed intervention, especially in the form of sanctions, has absolutely created an environment of economic instability and volatility that has led to people freaking the fuck out, understandably, on top of the internal